It's finally time. We are 8 weeks until our average last frost date, so we are going to be starting our tomatoes today. Welcome back, and if you're new here, my name is Kayla, and we are growing in Zone 3 just west of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. So here at 8 weeks, we're going to be starting all our tomatoes. Today I'm going to be starting 36 different varieties. I will go over each of them as I start them. Some of them I've grown before, but some of them are brand new to me. And if you've been gardening long, you kind of realize that tomatoes are kind of like a gateway garden vegetable. At least for me, they're one of those first things that I started to grow where I'm like, whoa, what are all these different varieties? First off, I'm going to grow some paste tomatoes. I have these Amish paste. Grew these last year. I really liked them. They were a decent size. I used to grow the Roma VF, and I found that they were a lot smaller compared to the Amish paste. So to me, the Amish paste was just a little bit better because I can grow, for the same plant, I'm getting twice as much fruit basically. So I'm going to grow a decent amount of these Amish paste in order for all the canning, you know, the sauces and such. You can use any type of tomato to make sauces. It's just the paste ones are less watery, so you don't have to cook them down as much. So again, for my tomatoes, I'm just going to multi-sow them, and then once they get those first set of true leaves, I will separate them into, I like to use the solo cups for my tomatoes. They work really well because even if growing in one of these, they're not as deep. Those solo cups are nice because they're a little bit deeper, just to allow that much more of the root development. Last year, I also grew a kind called Elizabethan Roma, and they grew pretty well, but they kind of seemed more diseased. Like all of the fruit had kind of speckles on them. So I'm not going to grow those this year just because I know that these ones do really well, and I'm going to try to focus on what will grow well here. And do that pack. I'm not putting it back with my other ones. And the second paste tomato I'm growing are these Hungarian heart. Now these I grew last year for the first time and I absolutely loved them. They are just a big ox heart, so kind of like a heart looking tomato and just really meaty, really big. So I'm going to just focus on these ones for my paste tomato because again, they do really well in my climate. And I'm just going to plant all the rest of these as well. Looks like I'm really going to have to be on my seed saving game this year. I'm going to try to save as many seeds as I can. Now next I have a whole bunch of kind of the big heirloom slicer, yellow gold tomatoes, oranges, different shades of that. Last year I bought a whole bunch to try and a lot of them worked out, but I think they just were a little bit crowded. So I'm going to try again this year to really decide which ones work well for us. Maybe give them a little bit more space. So I'm going to be starting a lot of them. I like the yellow tomatoes. They're a little bit less acidic, a little bit more of those sweeter tones. So the first one I have here is this Golden King of Siberia. Now this I did grow last year and I did really like it. So this will probably be one of the grow every year type things. Again, not too many seeds left here. We'll just start them all. The plant, like in the description, it even says it looks like it's half dead. It's a really just a really wimpy looking plant. Like it looks like it's gonna fall over, but it produced such big tomatoes and a decent amount of them for the size of the plant. So I really did enjoy these ones. Now being in the colder climate, in the northern climate, I'm always looking for tomatoes that, you know, the Siberian tomatoes, Russian, Ukrainian, all those, because we're kind of at the same latitudes, similar type climate, so then I know that these tomatoes will do well there. I'm just going to call it the Golden King. Okay, and then we have these Hillbilly Potato Leaf. Grew these last year again. They did pretty good. Just liking all those different varieties. Now the reason this says is potato leaf is because it has a potato leaf. So they're all part of the nightshade family, but the potato leaf tomatoes, their leaves look like a potato plant's leaves. They're a little bit different than your typical tomato plant, so it's just kind of neat to have those different looks. And then we have this gold medal. Another yellow one that I grew this last year as well. And again, it did pretty good. I just never really had the chance enough ripen kind of at the same time to really test them. I'm going to try to be more intentional on that this year. I'm just trying to be careful here of how many I plant because of course I don't need a whole bunch. I really only want maybe 2 or 3 of each of these. And when I get 20 to come up and I grow them all, I give them away or sell them. But this year I'm trying to focus on a lot of other things, so I don't want to be overwhelmed by the tomato plants like I am every year. Okay, then we're going to be growing this old German. Grew this one last year. It's really pretty. It's a mixture of like yellows and reddish, and it looks really, really nice. And it grows really well here for me as well. Next, we have a few new ones. This one is the pineapple tomato. Pretty popular one on YouTube. It looks very similar to these other ones, so I thought let's give it a try. It's kind of funny when I say tomatoes are the gateway garden vegetable because I don't really even like tomatoes, and that's not to say I don't like the flavor because I love tomato soup and ketchup and all that kind of stuff. I've just never really liked to eat in a raw tomato, and I always thought it was because of the texture. But since growing tomatoes, I always thought they were bland, but since growing tomatoes, I realized it's just the store-bought ones that are bland. So over these last many years of growing tomatoes, I've slowly just started to eat them a little bit fresher every year. Now I enjoy a few of them fresh out of the garden, but mostly just, I can put them on nachos or on a pizza, or even like make my homemade salsas and pico de gallo, and I really can enjoy them. This is an azoichka tomato. It's a Russian heirloom, so again, that same kind of environment that we have here. Hopefully it should do pretty good here. So I know a lot of these tomatoes are so similar you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So when I'm growing them, again, because I don't really eat them fresh, I'm not just looking for flavor. I am looking for how well it grows in our climate and how big the fruits are versus the plant, so that I can really just, again, maximize what I'm getting. But then of course you could have one that you just really love and it doesn't produce very much, but you're going to grow it every year because you just really love it. Then next we're going to grow this Kellogg's breakfast tomato. Again, this is another really highly recommended one. I have not grown it before, so we're going to try it out and test it amongst our other ones there. And then lastly, we have this Jubilee. This one I think is a little bit smaller. It's not the big slicer, but again, it's a yellow one that comes recommended. Sometimes it's nicer to have just those smaller ones. They're probably better to, cut up for salads and such. Okay, and then next we have is Thornburn's Terracotta. Now this is a beautiful tomato. I grew this last year and it is so pretty because it pretty much is that color, like a terracotta pot. They grow really well up here too, and they grow pretty big. So we always like that. Again, another thing that we grow for eating and also for the beauty. Okay, next is these Sunfire Flare tomatoes. I grew these last year and they are so beautiful. They start out kind of like green with the purple, and then they'll ripen to like a reddy kind of look like they've been sun-fired almost. I'm going to grow a few of these this year. Maybe I can give some away. And then also once they all start ripening, I just love being able to give away baskets with all these different colors and varieties of tomatoes for people to try. And that might just get them into growing a garden of their own and realizing it's not just a plain old boring red tomato. Okay, and then we have these Amethyst Jewel. I grew these ones last year too, but I put them up by my cherry tomatoes and they didn't really thrive. So I'm going to go ahead and grow a few more this year and kind of give them a spot with the big boys and see if we can get a few of them to ripen. They're very similar, I think, to the Sunfired Flare, just those really neat different colors. It's kind of one of those things, you want your colorful tomato basket, or, if you're a homesteader, you want those colorful egg baskets. It's just kind of a great feeling because you're putting all this work and effort in, and the rewards, that the health benefits you're getting from it. It just helps, gives you that little bit of extra motivation when sometimes you're doing the hard tasks, knowing that you're going to get something that you can't buy. Okay, now next I have my darker tomatoes. I have this Cherokee Purple. Grew this one last year. It did pretty good, as well as the other ones that I grew. I fell in love with these darker tomatoes when I was making nachos. These guys aren't coming out. And they're really good on nachos. I never used to like tomatoes on my nachos, but I've been learning to like the fresh tomatoes and not just the sauces and such. And it's so funny, after making nachos with these guys, I would actually find the nacho that had the biggest tomato on to eat. People will say they have kind of like a smoky flavor, which sounds weird, but I don't know, on the nachos, that definitely would be what I would describe it as. So then we also have this Black Krim. Again, I grew this last year. Just like with the yellow tomatoes, I was trying to do the comparison with the black tomatoes. And again, they got kind of all mixed up and I didn't know what was what. So I'm going to be better about that this year. Either way, we enjoyed them all. I just wasn't quite sure exactly which ones were which. So we'll try to be better about that one this year. And then the last dark one is the Paul Robeson. Again, another kind of popular YouTube tomato. And we'll grow a few of these ones and we'll see if we can actually get them compared this year. Okay, now next I'm going to start a couple of my favorite cherry tomatoes. I have a couple little containers here and I want to have a lot of these, so I'm going to multi-sow them. The first one, that is the Sun Gold. If you don't like tomatoes, you need to grow these because you will like them. I don't like tomatoes, and I started liking fresh tomatoes after trying these. So if there's any sort of gateway tomato, I would definitely say the Sun Golds are it. They just have such a good flavor and they're so prolific. The plants keep growing and growing, and 2 of these tomato plants will give you enough little cherry tomatoes to last you for the season. They're one of the better producing plants that I have. So a great tasting tomato that produces really, really well. It's definitely my #1 recommended tomato for anybody to grow. That is the Sun Gold. Now the Sun Golds are a hybrid. So while you can save the seeds, they might not breed true to the parent. And that might be a fun little project for you to do too, is just start saving the seeds and then growing them the next year and just kind of keep picking those plants that you like. And eventually you will have kind of your own open pollinated version. Next one I grew for the first time last year, and that is this amethyst cream. I actually got these seeds at the seed swap last year, grew them, and they became my second favorite, if not maybe favorite tomato. They were so good. They're just a really, really light, almost like a champagne white looking tomato with little purple shoulders, and they're very sweet and small. Like sometimes the sun golds can be a little bit of a mouthful, a little bit too big, but these amethyst cream are smaller, so they're just the perfect little mouthful. So I'm definitely going to be growing a few of these ones this year, more than last year. I only had a couple little plants last year, and it was not enough. Again, so these were seeds that somebody saved from their garden locally, and I think that's another reason why they could have done pretty good for us. I'll actually be going to that seed swap there next week. I've got some seeds to take, and we'll see what other seeds that I can find. There's also seed companies there, so I've kind of been perusing the websites. I might see a few more additions I'll need to add. Next, I have a small little tray, and these ones I'm going to be starting what I like to call my cold climate tomatoes. So these are tomatoes that have been traditionally grown in the colder climates, and they have adapted well, so they can fruit sooner or last longer. A lot of times they're very like short days to maturity. First being is this Scotia tomato. I've grown these for the last 5, 6, 7 years. I'm not even sure. They always produce really well for me really early. They're not the best tasting tomato. They're not the most prolific, but it's just nice to get that early tomato. They're shorter, so they don't get super big and out of control. Most of the time, they're probably one of the first tomatoes that's ripe in the garden and then we're eating. So it does give you that really good taste and flavor before some of these other ones that take a lot longer actually get ripe. So again, that's the Scotia. And then next we have this Stupese. I grew this last year and it did really well too. Just kind of like bigger than a cherry, kind of smaller than a plum. Again, they're for kind of our climate. They grew on nice little vines, had a whole bunch of clusters per vine. So we'll grow these ones again because I like those kind of like tomato on the vine style tomatoes. They look pretty neat. Next we have this Tibet Early. And this is another one of those rare old heirlooms, smaller fruits. A lot of the colder climate tomatoes I find produce smaller fruits, but that's just because we don't have the time to ripen a big fruit from green to red to orange and like huge. So by growing these ones, again, you're just going to be able to maximize what you have. And the other thing too is when you get those frosts. So in the fall, actually when we got those first few little frosts, these tomatoes weren't damaged. They continue to grow, whereas a lot of the big ones just got fried. Especially up here when, you can get a frost in like middle of September, early September, but then we're still going to get 5, 6 weeks of nice weather after that. By having them be able to survive that little bit of frost, you're going to potentially get more weeks of being able to harvest these tomatoes. Okay, then we have this Sasha's Altea. Again, another one. This is 57 to 59 days until it matures. So it's going to mature pretty quickly. And again, that frost comes in the fall. They're just going to produce for you all the way up until that and then even past it if it's not a super heavy killing frost. These ones I talked about in my seed haul or maybe when I was planting last year, and it's kind of a cool story, which a lot of these heirlooms have, about this man named Sasha who said he had the best tomatoes in all of Siberia, and he walked a whole couple of days to get this guy these seeds, and the person brought them back and started growing them, and now these are Sasha's Altea. So it's kind of really nice growing these tomatoes too when they have a story behind it, when you know that some man has been growing these tomatoes in Siberia for how many years. Now his legacy can kind of live on in other gardens as well. Okay, and then we have the Kalinka Malinka. This was my favorite tomato last year. I had them up top here, and they are just so prolific. They produced really quickly. They do say they grow in a little bush habit, but I still think you need to stake them because I didn't, and they just flop over because they are so full of tomatoes. So I would still cage these, but I don't think you need to like have one of those huge tomato cages, or like it's not going to vine up like some of those other ones do. It's one of the reasons I'm not planting those Elizabeth Romas, because they just grew. They were out of control crazy, and they didn't really produce anything more than anything else would. But these Kalinka Malinkas, I'm probably going to grow a big row of them along with my paste tomatoes down below because they're just really good. I'm going to save a few of these seeds. I have 4 little ones left just in case things don't go well. I'll be planting these next year. These will be my saved stash because unfortunately this company, Bright Bush Farms, that I bought all these ones from last year is no longer selling seeds. And lastly, this is new to me, but again, comes highly recommended. This is a 42-day tomato. So these are supposedly only take 42 days. And up here, I will take that. And that is something really exciting. Could you imagine a tomato in 42 days? Well, we will find out. One thing to note is with tomatoes or anything basically that says start 6 to 8 weeks, if it tells you on the seed packet to start it early, The days to maturity are going to be from your date of transplant. So these aren't 42 days from today when I started. It's going to be basically 42 days from when I transplanted into the garden. So for things that say direct sow, those days to maturity are generally from when you're direct sowing it. That's just something to note. But that's still pretty early because if I plant these towards the end of May, that means I'm going to be getting tomatoes at the beginning of July, which I don't think I've ever had tomatoes that early. We got high hopes for these 42-day tomatoes. Now it's time to start the rest of our cherry tomatoes. Really love cherry tomatoes because they ripen sooner. They're just smaller. It doesn't take as long to ripen that little fruit. So last year I had a huge whole row of cherry tomatoes up top, and it was just really fun to be able to go and pick all the different kinds and have a nice basket full of all these different tomatoes. First off, we'll be starting these atomic grape. Growing these the last couple years. These are a little bit bigger than I expected, so it's almost like a 2-bite little tomato. But they're pretty good. My daughter likes them. I think they're okay. Again, not liking the fresh tomatoes, so we'll see. I'll try a few again this year and we'll see how it goes. They're a really pretty color with like purples and kind of greens, but it can kind of be hard to tell when they're ripe. So you kind of have to just like kind of squeeze them and see once they're starting to soften up a bit, then you know they're ripe. Here's another little hack for you is I ran out of labels, but I just buy these little stickers, these little square kind of labels at the dollar store. These are old, they're all wrapped up. And then what I'll do is I'll just stick them on my tray with 2. So I know this front one is the front one and the top one is the back tray. And then I'll just write on here and I can know what is in each cell. Definitely need to order some more labels. So in the back corner up here, I planted those atomic grapes. So on this top one, I'll just write atomic grape. This actually I started doing because I had the really, really short domes. And then when you put the big labels on, the domes don't sit on top if you want to cover these when you start them. So I found by this way, those domes fit really well. Next, we have a black strawberry. Just again, another one of those dark, pretty little tomatoes. We grew these last year and they were pretty good. Again, not our favorite. So I'm only going to actually want to grow is just like 1 or 2 of each of these plants. Because again, cherry tomatoes can be pretty prolific. And while you can use them for processing and sauce, it's just really tedious because there's a lot of skins and such there. So we really just like them mostly for fresh eating. Okay, and then we have these sunrise bumblebee. Growing these ones before, and they are really pretty. I think maybe anything with that sunrise or sun in the name, they make a really nice addition to like a salad or a little cherry basket bowl. And I just wrote sunrise bumble. I don't know if you're like me and make up short little nicknames for the varieties that you're growing. Okay, next is a new one. This is a Sylvana's Gold cherry tomato. It's very similar to that sun gold flavor. So that'd be really exciting if these ones are good like that and I can save the seeds. We'll start a few of those to test out. Still got lots of seeds to save for next year. Tomatoes are one of those seeds that can last a long time when stored correctly, which is nice because sometimes, you know, you're only getting 10 seeds in a tomato pack, but other times you're getting 30, 40, 50 seeds, and most people don't need that many tomatoes. And as long as they're stored, you know, cool, dark, dry place, they can last for years to come. There's been instances of 80, 90, 100-year-old tomato seeds germinating and growing, and they've actually been able to bring back certain tomatoes that were kind of extinct. Then we have this gold nugget. I grew this one last year. This one's really cool because it's short. It's only like a 2-foot tall plant. And that's really nice because some of these plants can get quite a bit out of control. And you're constantly having to, you know, tie them up or stake them or... So that's kind of what I thought with the Kalinka Malinkas last year. I don't have to stake these, but those you did because they were so prolific. So I'm not saying you won't have to tie these up or stake them, but they're just going to be a little bit more manageable in the process. I think this was actually the first one that I put the right amount of tomato seeds in. I think I have been putting a lot of seeds in these. Oh, 1 year maybe I'll learn. Next we have a new one. This is a cream sausage. This is one of those impulse purchases when I did the seed order last year for the seed sale. But it's always nice. Again, I like those yellow tomatoes. Yellow is my favorite color. And these ones are neat because they're not your typical round tomato. They're more of the sausage, you know, pear-shaped. We have grown the yellow pear. A lot of people like it, but we don't really care for it. It doesn't have that much intensive a flavor compared to some of these other ones. And it also splits really easily, which made like the skin kind of breaks. Mind you, the sun golds, they're really bad for splitting. Like once they get to their ripeness, if you touch it, it will split open. They taste so good, we'll forgive them, right? Next we have this Gandalf. I grew it last year. This is a variegated one, so that means that the leaves are kind of like, they have a white and the green on it. They're pretty neat. Like it wasn't super prolific, you couldn't really tell. The tomatoes were really cool. They were like kind of like a red with yellow streaks. And then even when they were still green, they kind of had the streaky pattern on it. So there's a pretty cool looking tomato. And then also Gandalf, I mean, Lord of the Rings. So that's just, who doesn't want to grow a tomato that's like that? I'm sure you're like me with that too. And a lot of times we're going to grow that tomato or that variety just for the name. It's one of those, you might be a gardener if you grow a variety just for the name. And we have this gobstopper. I got it at the seed swap there last year and it grew pretty good. So we're going to grow a few more of those again. It's kind of a neat one because it's kind of like greeny and almost translucent. So just being able to, again, add that rainbow cherry tomato basket. That's the goal with all of these guys here. Something you're not going to be able to buy at the grocery store. That's the gobstop there. Last but not least for the cherry tomatoes is the Tiny Tim. This I have been growing since I started growing tomatoes. It is my every year I grow it. Love this tomato. It is tiny. It goes 18 inches, 12 to 18 inches. But sometimes you have to stake it because it is so prolific. These are like kind of like the little tomato that could, small but mighty. They're so cute, especially when they're little seedlings because they are just tiny as a seedling. You think, oh, my seedling is stunted. But no, it's just a Tiny Tim. So they would be one of those ones that are the micro dwarf tomatoes. But these ones are actually an heirloom. They're open pollinated. So these have been around a long time. Almost done. We just have 3 more seeds. These are kind of miscellaneous ones. First up, we have this Principe Bourgeois. So these are growing for sun-dried tomatoes. I grew them last year. They were a little bit slow getting going, but then they did take off and they got a pretty good amount from them. I didn't really get enough to be able to like sun dry them. So this year I'm going to try to maybe grow a nice good half row because I want to get a whole bunch of sun-dried tomatoes just as a different way to preserve them because I actually really like sun-dried tomato salad dressing. And that one's going to be the Prince Borg. And then we have these Git stuff. Now I didn't grow them last year. I have grown them before and I wasn't a big fan. They look like a pepper and they're kind of got this brain looking jelly mass in the middle. But what they are for is for making basically pretty much the only thing they're probably best for is making stuffed tomatoes. So I'm kind of on a mission this year to be a little bit opposite, not on purpose, of what they all say is grow what you like to eat. I kind of want to start to also train myself to eat what I can grow. Because when I grew these, they grew really well. Very prolific, got a lot of tomatoes off them. So, how many stuffed tomatoes do you need? But again, let's go ahead and pre-make them and freeze them. This is the goals. So we're going to grow some more of these Git stuff this year. They're also a really pretty looking tomato. Okay, and then lastly is our Rosy Falls tomato. Grew these last year. These are what's called a hanging basket tomato. So they are meant to be grown in hanging baskets. And they did pretty good. They grew considering they lacked water because I had them down in the area where I didn't have good easy access to frequent watering because anything in a pot or a basket you're going to have to water more than, say, in your ground. And I had them down and they just basically didn't get watered enough. They still produced and they still produced quite a bit. Never really got the huge overhang that I was kind of anticipating. So I'm going to start a few more this year and maybe plant 2 or 3 in a bigger pot up closer to my patio or my house where I can actually pay attention and water them more. And then we'll see if we can get a nice, big, beautiful hanging basket of tomatoes. Okay, we made it. 36 varieties. Probably way too many tomatoes than I actually need. That's the fun of it. That's why we do it, just to be able to grow all of these really neat things that you will not find in a grocery store. Next week should be pretty fun. We're going to go to that seed swap, and then I will also show all of the seeds that I pick up from there, buy, swap. Should be a lot of fun. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.